Welcome to Cheating Story Star. Today, Cole shares the moment an ordinary afternoon turned into a discovery that made him question everything about his marriage. One quiet conversation changed what he thought he knew forever. Let's begin. My name is Cole. I used to believe a marriage ended with a confession. I was wrong. Mine ended with a sentence. I had come home early that Thursday because my final meeting had been canceled. I remember carrying 2 coffees through the front door, smiling to myself because I knew exactly how my wife liked hers. Then I heard her laughing. I stopped. It came from the kitchen. Her laugh had changed over the last year. It had become smaller around me, careful, almost practiced. But this was different. This was the woman I married. I stood behind the hallway wall and listened. She was on the phone. I couldn't hear the man's voice, only hers. Then she said something that made my hand tighten around the coffee cup. I needed something different. Silence. Then quieter. Cole isn't a bad husband. That's the problem. My stomach dropped. She continued. He's good to me. He just doesn't make me feel anything anymore. I stared at the kitchen doorway. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I wanted to walk in. I wanted to ask who he was. Instead, I placed the coffees on the table and quietly stepped back outside. I sat in my car for 11 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I simply repeated her words in my head. I needed something different. And for the first time in my marriage, I wondered what she had found. That night, I acted normal. That was harder than I expected. My wife, Claire, came downstairs wearing the blue sweater I had bought her 2 Christmases ago. She smiled. Why are you so quiet? I looked at her, because I suddenly understood that I had been living beside someone whose life I knew only from the parts she allowed me to see. Long day, I said. She accepted the answer. That almost hurt more. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I had trained myself not to notice. Her phone was always face down. She started taking longer showers. She began leaving the house for quick errands that somehow took an hour. And there was one new habit that bothered me most. She smiled at her phone. Not often. Just enough. I knew that smile. It wasn't for me. I remembered the last time she'd looked at me like that. 3 years earlier. Before work became stressful. Before conversations became schedules. Before affection became something we had to plan. I kept asking myself the same question. Was I really the problem? Maybe I had become predictable. Maybe marriage had made us ordinary. Maybe she really did need something different. But another thought kept returning. Different from what? I didn't ask. Not yet. I needed facts. Because suspicion is emotional. Evidence is not. And if there was another man in my marriage, I wasn't going to discover him by losing control. I was going to discover him by staying perfectly calm. I started with nothing dramatic. I watched. That was all. I noticed that Claire always took her phone when she went downstairs. I noticed she had changed her password. I noticed a new contact saved under the name Mara. But there was no Mara in her life. I didn't touch her phone. I didn't need to. People reveal themselves when they believe nobody is paying attention. On Monday, she told me she had dinner with a coworker. On Wednesday, she said the same thing. On Friday, she told me she was going to a bookstore. I nodded. Have fun. She smiled. Thanks. I watched her drive away. Then I opened my laptop. The following week, I checked our shared financial records. There was a hotel charge. 2 nights. The date was from 3 weeks earlier. Claire had told me she had been visiting her sister. I stared at the transaction for almost a minute. I felt something inside me go strangely quiet. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Recognition. The pieces were beginning to connect. I didn't confront her. Instead, I made a copy of the financial records. I wrote down dates, times, locations. I kept everything private. And then I noticed something else. The hotel was 20 miles from her office, but only 3 miles from the apartment building where her coworker, Daniel, lived. Daniel. The name suddenly had weight. I remembered him. The harmless colleague. The man she mentioned once and then never mentioned again. That night, Claire kissed me before bed. I kissed her forehead. She whispered, I love you. I looked into the darkness after she fell asleep. And for the first time, I understood that sometimes I love you doesn't mean what you think it means. Sometimes it means I don't want to lose what you provide. The final piece arrived on a Tuesday morning. I had hired a private investigator. Not because I wanted revenge, because I needed certainty. 3 days later, he handed me a thin folder. I opened it in my car. Photographs. Dates. Hotel entrances. Claire. Daniel. Together. More than once. The investigator had also found messages confirming what the photographs already told me. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't one bad night. It was a second relationship, one that had existed for almost 7 months. I closed the folder. For several minutes, I simply stared through the windshield. 7 months. 7 months of dinners. 7 months of birthdays. 7 months of sleeping beside me while secretly belonging somewhere else. I drove home. Claire was sitting at the kitchen table. She looked up. "What's wrong?" I placed the folder in front of her. She opened it. Her face changed instantly. She looked at the first photograph, then the second. Then she stopped. "Cole?" I raised my hand. "Don't." Her eyes filled with tears. "I can explain." "I know." She stared at me. "You know?" I nodded. "You told him you needed something different." Her face went pale. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not regret. Fear. And that difference told me everything. Claire cried. She apologized. She said she felt lonely. She said Daniel understood her. She said she never planned for things to become serious. I listened. Every word. Then I asked one question. "Were you going to tell me?" She couldn't answer. That was the answer. I stood and walked toward the hallway. "Cole, please." I stopped. She came toward me. "I can fix this." I turned around. "No." She froze. "You don't even want to try?" "I tried for years." Her face collapsed. I continued quietly. "I tried while you were deciding whether I was enough." She began crying harder. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I didn't threaten Daniel. I simply placed my wedding ring on the table. Then I placed the hotel receipts beside it. And finally, I placed a second document underneath them. She looked down. "What is that?" "The divorce filing." She stopped breathing for a moment. "You already filed?" "Yes." "When?" "Yesterday." That was the moment I finally understood the difference between revenge and revenge fantasies. Revenge is making someone suffer. Control is refusing to let them decide what happens to you next. Claire reached for my hand. I stepped back. She whispered my name. "Cole?" I looked at her one last time. "You wanted something different." I picked up my coat. "Now you have it." Then I walked out. The strange thing about leaving wasn't the silence. It was the relief. For months I had believed something was wrong with me. I thought I wasn't exciting enough, romantic enough, interesting enough. I had compared myself to a man I didn't even know. That was the cruelest part. Claire had made me compete in a race I didn't know I was running. After I moved into my apartment, I stopped checking her messages. I stopped asking mutual friends what she was doing. I stopped wondering whether she regretted losing me. Because eventually I realized something. Her regret wasn't my responsibility. Neither was her loneliness. Neither was the life she chose after destroying ours. I had spent years trying to make someone choose me. Now I understood something far more valuable. I didn't need to be chosen. I needed to choose myself. And the last thing I ever heard about Claire was that Daniel eventually left her too. I felt nothing when I heard it. No satisfaction. No anger. Just silence. The same silence that had filled my marriage long before I finally walked away. Only this time the silence belonged to me, and I had no intention of giving it back.